General Hospital spoilers reveal that the truth was never meant to stay buried, and with Britt's return to Port Charles, the delicate power dynamics that once kept the city in balance are now collapsing in slow, calculated chaos. No one had expected her survival, much less her transformation. Once thought lost to tragedy, Britt had not only survived, but thrived in the shadows. Her reappearance is no accident, it is a storm. Planned and unleashed at the precise moment when WSB is most vulnerable. With Brennan at the helm of WSB, commanding silence through force and fear, Britt has emerged not as a daughter returning home, but as an agent of annihilation. Her father's legacy lives through her, not just in blood, but in ideology, and that ideology now wears a mask of calm, calculated revenge. The DVX took what was broken and shaped it into a weapon. They trained Britt to exploit systems, to mimic loyalty, to destabilize from within. And now she stands on the edge of reclaiming Port Charles, not through healing, but through controlled collapse. Every step she takes is measured. Every glance, every word, every fleeting moment is choreographed for maximum disorientation. Jason, haunted by shadows of the past, begins to sense her presence not through proof but instinct. He tells Sunny, quietly, cautiously, that he believes he saw her. But Sunny, immersed in his own conflicts with Lucas, Marco, and the rising pressure from Carly, doesn't fully understand the scale of what's unfolding. Jason turns instead to Liesl, but her grief clouds her mind. She insists her daughter is gone, burned to ash, buried in memory. Still, Jason persists. He pulls Elizabeth into the mystery, pushing her to access hospital records, seeking anomalies, inconsistencies, or anything that would prove Britt never truly died. The files are clean, too clean. Sanitized with surgical precision. Jason knows what that means. It's not absence. It's erasure. And erasure this precise has fingerprints that point directly to DVX. What he doesn't yet realize is that Britt never left because she was chased. She left because she was chosen. While the WSB battles internal fractures and Brennan tries to hold on to control through sheer intimidation, Britt is already inside the gates. Not physically, yet, but her influence is seeping through cracks. Medical shipments rerouted. Surveillance feeds manipulated. Doctors redirected without reason. She is laying groundwork. Mapping every flaw in the system her enemies depend on. And she is not alone. DVX has operatives scattered across Europe, and now some are hiding in plain sight in Port Charles. Britt is their leader. Their symbol, their blade. She moves quietly, but her goals are not subtle. Brennan, long seen as invincible within the WSB's rigid hierarchy, now finds himself threatened by a ghost from his agency's bloodiest history. Britt isn't attacking his body, she's attacking his myth. She's dismantling the story he's built, the story of order, control, justice. And as that myth crumbles, so does his grip on Port Charles. Anna, once the anchor of truth in WSB's storm, begins to feel doubt. She questions Brennan's increasingly desperate orders, his refusal to acknowledge the shifting tides. She doesn't yet know that Britt has intercepted messages meant for her. Manipulated sources she once trusted, and is feeding her just enough clarity to breed suspicion, but not enough to build a case. Britt wants chaos. She wants the WSB to devour itself. As the pressure mounts, Britt makes her first silent move, a coded transmission to Victor's last known contact in Prague. The message is intercepted by Valentine, who recognizes the encryption style instantly, one he once saw on documents that tied his own father to Faison. Valentine begins to worry not just about Britt's survival, but about what she might know. And worse, what she might reveal. Because Britt doesn't return for family. She returns for leverage. Every name she knows, every file she touched, every operation she once assisted, these are now weapons. And in the DVX's hands, those weapons are loaded. Back in Port Charles, Liesl begins to unravel. Jason's questions and Elizabeth's unease awaken something buried, the sense that her grief may have been manipulated. She returns to Britt's final belongings and finds a pendant, a simple piece of jewelry she'd forgotten. But inside is a microchip. She takes it to Spinelli, who cracks it open and finds encrypted logs. All time-stamped after Britt's supposed death. Audio files. Medical diagrams. Surveillance maps of WSB safehouses. Liesel breaks. She knows now. Her daughter didn't die, she disappeared by choice. Meanwhile, Britt watches from a distance. She sees the fractures forming, Jason's relentless pursuit of the truth, Liesel's emotional collapse, Anna's quiet rebellion, Brennan's tightening grip. Everything is aligning. But she doesn't anticipate one variable, Scout. The child once barely on her radar has now become a symbol of vulnerability. If Jason finds her, if he uses her to bait Britt, the mission could falter. And so Britt issues her first DVX directive to Port Charles: protect the mission at all costs, including collateral. A series of unexplained incidents follow. The hospital loses power during a transplant surgery. Carly receives an anonymous tip warning her not to let Amelia leave town. Michael discovers that his personal emails about Wiley have been intercepted. Drew, unknowingly manipulated from within, begins to suspect Carly, not Britt, is the source of leaks. Distrust blossoms. Every alliance cracks. And still, Britt waits. Her next move is direct. A brief, cloaked appearance in a hospital hallway. Just long enough for Elizabeth to glimpse her face. No one believes her. But the doubt is planted. And that's all Britt needs. She is not trying to kill Port Charles. She's trying to make it kill itself. With paranoia. With betrayal. With fear. By the time Jason finally finds the footage, grainy, obscured, but unmistakable, it's too late. Britt has already crossed the border. She's already activated operatives in Greece, Serbia, and Morocco. Brennan receives an ultimatum: step down, surrender files on 5 covert agents, or face global exposure. He refuses. But he knows the game is over. Not because he's been defeated by a military force. But because Britt has become what he feared most, a ghost trained by the DVX, forged by betrayal, and reborn to burn it all down. The battle for Port Charles has begun. And Britt is no longer the casualty. She's the weapon. Britt is returning not as a victim of fate, but as the calculated heir to a dark legacy, one forged by Faison's obsession and Dalton's unholy experiments. Her reappearance in Port Charles marks not just a resurrection, but a declaration. Beneath the surface of her carefully reconstructed identity lies a labyrinth of coded memories, biochemical knowledge, and psychological manipulation that ties her not only to her infamous father, but to a generation of covert medical horrors the world was never meant to witness. The whispers surrounding Dalton's last experiments, projects never officially acknowledged. Tests conducted without consent, patients who vanished, are no longer whispers. They live within Britt, embedded in her blood, mapped into her cellular memory, and weaponized through her intellect. Everything about Britt's return defies logic. She moves like someone unafraid of death, because she's already been to its doorstep and chose not to knock. Her motives are unclear. Yet her presence alone unravels the fragile balance of Port Charles. Jason senses it first, the way the city seems colder, tighter, less forgiving. Liesel tries to explain it away as grief. But even she begins to question the gaps in her own memory, gaps that Dalton may have helped engineer. And as more details emerge about Dalton's work with neurological implants and behavioral manipulation, the question no longer becomes whether Britt is in control of her actions, but who else might be pulling the strings from behind the curtain. The madness escalates quietly. Hospital scans go missing. Patients suffer sudden memory loss. A child begins speaking in languages they were never taught. These are not accidents, they are echoes. Symptoms of a larger experiment being reawakened. And Britt, whether she knows it or not, is the catalyst. Her presence reactivates the sins of a past everyone hoped to forget. But she is no longer a passive carrier of these horrors, she's their most evolved product. The line between science and obsession has blurred, and with each step Britt takes deeper into her father's legacy. The more it becomes clear that Port Charles is no longer a city of healing, it's a test chamber for something darker. As chaos spreads and old secrets rise, it becomes undeniable. Britt has returned with a purpose. And that purpose is tied to the darkest parts of Faison's vision and the most inhuman chapters of Dalton's legacy. What happens next will not be survival. It will be transformation. And no one, not Jason, not Sonny, not even Liesel, will escape untouched. Already, Brennan's command over the WSB begins to falter as whispered rumors of rogue agents, compromised files, and unidentified operatives ripple through the global intelligence community. Britt's return is not only a local disturbance, it's a geopolitical event, signaling to every interested party that the balance of power is shifting. Some fear she may have access to data stolen during the last DVX-WSB conflict. Others believe she may have inherited a network of sleeper agents conditioned through Dalton's methods. But the truth is more terrifying. Britt is operating independently, driven not by revenge, but by evolution. She has embraced the darkness that created her and now sees the world as it truly is, a battlefield of influence, manipulation, and psychological warfare. In the silence of her mind, there is no more conflict about who she is. There is only clarity, and with it, a mission. Not to destroy, but to force everyone else to adapt, or be erased. As Port Charles becomes the epicenter of a silent war, those who once thought they were safe must confront their own illusions. The question is no longer whether Britt can be stopped. It is whether anyone is ready to face what she has become. For in her, Faison's madness and Dalton's ambition live on, not as shadows of the past, but as the new reality. One that is intelligent, cold, and ruthlessly inevitable. Brennan is no longer the composed architect of covert power he once appeared to be. Beneath his carefully polished veneer, fear has begun to ferment into desperation. And the carefully constructed order of the WSB is beginning to crack under the weight of revelations that were never supposed to surface. Britt's return has become more than just a mystery, it is a declaration of war, and Brennan is at the center of her wrath. With every calculated move she makes, she dismantles the lies he built his empire on. Her accusations are not whispered behind closed doors, they are spoken clearly, methodically, and with evidence that rattles the very foundation of his influence. The crimes she exposes aren't just historical errors, they're living wounds, manipulations, human experimentation, and assassinations authorized under Brennan's watch, carried out with surgical precision, then buried beneath bureaucracy and sealed files. Now, those files are open. And Brennan is running out of time. What terrifies Brennan most is not that Britt survived, but that she's become smarter, colder, and more deliberate than any operative he ever trained. She knows where the cracks are because she was shaped by the very system he built. And what she now unveils to the world is not just a personal vendetta, it's the complete unraveling of the WSB's inner sanctum. Her intelligence drops come with timed precision, reaching select figures in government, leaking to key media outlets, and even infiltrating intelligence databases once thought unhackable. Brennan's enemies are circling. But the worst part is that his former allies are beginning to doubt him. And it's all because of her. Caught in the crossfire are Carly and Jason. Two figures who once thought they understood the stakes of power in Port Charles. But now, with Britt's revelations spiraling out of control, they're thrust into a storm neither of them prepared for. Jason, loyal to truth and honor but tangled in a web of personal history, finds himself questioning every moment he believed Britt was lost. His guilt over leaving her behind morphs into a burning need for redemption, even if it means confronting his own blind spots about Brennan. Carly, meanwhile, is no stranger to calculated chaos, but this time, it's not just emotional betrayal or corporate sabotage. It's something much darker. Something encoded into Britt's mind from years of silent programming and buried trauma, now weaponized and unleashed like a virus on every institution Brennan once held sacred. As Britt peels back the layers of Brennan's regime, revealing one atrocity after another, the emotional toll on Carly and Jason intensifies. They're no longer just bystanders. Britt's campaign of truth makes them accessories to a revolution they didn't choose, and suddenly their names are tied to encrypted files, rogue memory recordings, and surveillance operations that place their lives, and their loved ones, in the path of a government organization teetering on the brink of collapse. The chaos is absolute. And the price of survival is rising. Brennan's paranoia grows by the day. Every shadow looks like a threat, every phone call a trap. He attempts damage control, ordering lockdowns, silencing whistleblowers, and attempting to paint Britt as unstable. But it's too late. The world is watching. And for the first time, Brennan understands that this isn't about power, it's about reckoning. The agent he tried to erase has returned not as a victim but as a force of retribution. And the ghosts of his past are no longer content to haunt him quietly. They scream now, through Britt's voice, through the evidence she carries, and through the choices Carly and Jason must make as their loyalty to one another is tested against the unraveling of truth. This is no longer just a scandal. It is a revolution born of betrayal, control, and secrets soaked in blood. And Port Charles has become ground zero. Brennan's fall was never going to be quiet, and Britt was never going to allow it. For years, Brennan sat atop the secretive world of WSB, manipulating operations, authorizing unspeakable experiments, and burying enemies behind walls of redacted files and disinformation. But what he never counted on was that one of those buried operations would birth his greatest threat. Britt was presumed dead, erased in official records. Her memory mourned only by those still clinging to hope. But what the world believed to be a tragedy was, in truth, a recalibration. In the hidden laboratories of Dalton's rogue scientific faction, Britt was remade. Her survival wasn't mercy, it was programming. She emerged not only alive, but forged in purpose. And now, Brennan finds himself the target of a legacy he cannot control and a daughter of darkness who no longer fears him. Everything that Britt endured in silence is now ammunition. The twisted experiments, the biochemical enhancements, the years of psychological warfare, all of it left her numb, calculating, and cold. But unlike her father, Britt never sought power for power's sake. She sought answers. And in finding those answers, she uncovered layer after layer of Brennan's crimes, each one more horrifying than the last. He didn't just authorize the conditioning of agents, he weaponized their pain. He turned human lives into experiments, loyalty into obedience, and betrayal into currency. And when Britt pieced it all together, she knew the only justice left was destruction. Not just of Brennan himself, but of the entire WSB structure that protected him. Carly and Jason, longtime operatives and reluctant allies, have found themselves dragged into Britt's vendetta. Jason, still recovering from the emotional scars of believing Britt dead, now sees her transformation with equal parts awe and fear. She is no longer the woman he once tried to protect. She doesn't want protection. She is fire, and she burns through every falsehood that Brennan left behind. Carly, ever protective of her family, grows increasingly alarmed by the intensity of Britt's obsession. What began as a mission to expose the truth has evolved into something far more dangerous, a campaign of vengeance that blurs the line between justice and obsession. Brennan, sensing the noose tightening, attempts one last manipulation. He leaks false intelligence, sets up decoys, and reaches out to old contacts willing to silence Britt in exchange for immunity. But every move he makes has already been predicted. Britt has studied him, his patterns, his code words, his fallback escape plans. She turns his tactics against him, forcing his allies to abandon him one by one. By the time he realizes he's truly alone, the world has already begun to turn on him. WSB directors start disavowing him in whispers. High-level agents demand answers. The empire he built is collapsing, and Britt isn't finished yet. She doesn't want Brennan to simply die. She wants his death to mean something. She orchestrates a public reveal, leaking encrypted data packets to global agencies, releasing footage of Brennan's unauthorized experiments, testimonials from victims long thought missing. Port Charles becomes the epicenter of the reckoning. News networks broadcast exposes. Politicians denounce WSB's shadow policies. And in the center of it all stands Britt, silent, composed, and unyielding. But with each step, she feels the weight of her actions press harder. The more she dismantles Brennan's legacy, the more she realizes how much of herself she has lost in the process. Her empathy, her warmth, her identity outside of revenge, all eroded. She no longer recognizes the woman she was, nor does she know if she can ever go back. When Brennan is finally captured, brought to a secret tribunal, he doesn't beg or plead. He smirks. He tells Britt that in destroying him, she has completed the work he started. That she, not he, is now the weapon. That the darkness has simply shifted hosts. His words haunt her long after the trigger is pulled. Brennan's death is swift, but its aftermath is catastrophic. Britt's leaks have exposed other factions, other rogue agencies, and chaos ripples across intelligence communities. WSB fractures. Old enemies re-emerge. The void left by Brennan becomes a power vacuum. And suddenly, the hero who toppled the tyrant is being hunted as a liability. Jason urges Britt to disappear, to find peace. But peace is no longer an option. She knows too much. She's seen too much. And part of her, the part that once craved closure, now craves control. Meanwhile, Carly struggles to hold her family together as the fallout from Britt's campaign shakes Port Charles. Sonny's connections to old WSB projects resurface. Michael finds himself under scrutiny due to old business dealings. Willow, trying to shield her children from the headlines, begins to fear that everything they built is crumbling. All paths lead back to Britt, and to the sins of the past. As Britt prepares to go underground once more, this time not as a fugitive but as a sentinel watching from the shadows, she realizes Brennan's death did not bring liberation. It brought revelation. She is part of something far larger now. Her father's legacy, Brennan's corruption. The experiments of Dalton, they weren't isolated events. They were threads in a larger tapestry of control, experimentation, and war. And she, reborn and remade, is now the only one capable of pulling the rest of it down. The question that remains, does she want to? Or has she already become the next nightmare Port Charles will have to confront? As the city reels and the world reacts, Britt vanishes once again, but her shadow remains, long and dark and undeniable. And deep within that shadow, new plans are already taking shape. Brennan's empire may be dead, but the war he started is far from over. And now, Britt holds the key to the future, and to the next great reckoning.